So if we know the information, so what information to collect, on the basis of that, he will prepare the list of questions. Before issuing the questionnaire, the researcher has to know who are the audience, who are the respondents. So from whom the correct information can be collected. The researcher will have an option to a particular question where he has to select only one option. That is known as what? Dichotomous questions. Hello everyone, I am Harshita, lecturer, Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. My dear students, today we are in the 7th session of Unit 3 of the subject Business Research Method, and the Unit 3 is all about data collection. So, how the researcher is going to collect the data in order to do his research work, that we are going to learn under this particular unit, and we have already learned few of the concepts under this particular unit. So let us quickly recall what we have discussed in a previous session. So we have discussed about survey method, that is through survey how the researcher is going to collect the information. Next we have learnt about questionnaires. Now what do you mean by questionnaire? So it is a list of questions which is prepared by the researcher in order to collect the information from the respondents. So in order to do his work, that is research work, he needs some information or data which can be collected through what? Through a list of questions which has to be given to the respondents. And it is one of the simplest method to collect the data or information. Under that we have learnt about characteristics of a good questionnaire. So what are the basic characteristics a questionnaire has to be? So this we have learnt about under the topic, that is characteristics of good questionnaire. Next topic was precautionary measures to be taken while drafting the questionnaire. So being the researcher, he wants to collect the information from the respondents. So how effective the questionnaire should be. So what are the things he has to remember while drafting the questionnaire. So that we have learnt in a previous session. So these are the few topics we have learnt in a previous session. In today's session, we shall continue with few more new topics. That is designing the questionnaire or steps in drafting the questionnaire. So what are the various steps involved in order to draft a good questionnaire? So let us see what are the process, or here we can tell it as designing a questionnaire or process of drafting a questionnaire. So the series or steps involved in drafting a questionnaire are given below. So let us see what are the series, and I have told you clearly. So if they ask a question on process, so it has to come in a step-by-step procedure. So if you write the first process, then later on you can't come to the last process. So it is a step-by-step procedure where after the first process you will go for second, after the second you will go for third, after third you will go for fourth. Like this, it's go on till the end of the process. So it has to be in the order itself. So remember, whenever they ask a question, not only relating to the questionnaire, any other topic, so it has to be in the form of process. That is, it is a step-by-step procedure. In between, you cannot skip any of the step here. And if it comes to process, always process of questionnaire or any other research design, it depends upon the researcher. So how the problem will be, at the same time how the information has collected by the researcher, on the basis of that, or on the topic what the researcher has selected, on the basis of that the process will be followed. So it's not that all the researcher has to follow the same process. So it depends upon the researcher and the activity or the research activity what he is going to undertake. So depending upon that, the process will be decided by the researcher itself. But this will be the common process which is followed by most of the researchers. Now coming to the first type, determining the required information. So we shall see the process first. Later on, I am going to discuss each and every point in detail. So what is the first point? Determining the required information. That is, in order to draft a questionnaire, so the researcher has to know what the information he has to collect. So if he knows what the information he has to collect, on the basis of that, he will design the questions. Next one is deciding the type of use of questionnaire. So there are various types of interview which has to be conducted. So it may be mail interview or the panel interview or the person to person interview. So such type of interview will be collected. Now the second step is that deciding the type of questionnaire. So what type of questionnaire has to be made? It depends upon the nature as well as the significance of research problem. On the basis of that, the researcher will decide what type of questionnaire he has to prepare. Next step is that determining the contents of individual question. Of course, he know what are the information that has to be included in the questionnaire. Now, while preparing the questionnaire, what are the contents which are included in each and every questions? So, you know, questionnaire means what? It is a set of questions. So here, as I've told you, so the question should be as minimum as possible. You can't give large number of questions to the respondents. So this we have learnt in our previous session. So if you give more number of questions in the questionnaire, what happens? It is 30 to 40 questions. The respondents will not answer those questions. By seeing the questionnaire itself, he will reject to answer. So the researcher has to keep in mind, so he has to prepare a questionnaire with minimum numbers. So the next step is that determining the contents. So what are the contents which are included in each and every question? So that he has to decide. Next one is form of questions and response. So what type of questions? So whether it is a elaborate questions or whether it is based on multiple choice questions. So most of the time, most of the researcher will give multiple choice questions. So it is the main intention is that in order to make the questionnaire as simple as possible. So what they will do, instead of giving elaborate questions, so they'll give the simple questions along with the options so that the respondents will answer easily. Next one is sequence and layout decisions of question. So in which order the question should be. So I have already discussed in a previous session, questions should be in a sequence or it should be in a order. Suppose our first question will be on some other topic and the second question is on another topic, then it will lead to the confusion to the respondent. So here the researcher has to be very careful. He has to make sure that the questions has to be in the order or in the sequence. Next one is pre-testing the questionnaire. So what do you mean by pre-testing? So before the questionnaire is distributed to the whole population, the researcher will distribute to a group of people or group of respondents. So he will distribute that questionnaire to the group of respondents and he'll see how the reaction or what is the reaction of those respondents by filling the questionnaire. That is, once it is positive, so after testing, if it is positive, then he can distribute to the whole population. So these are the few steps here. In today's session, we shall individually discuss each and every process of questionnaire. Now coming to the first process, that is determining the required information. So this I have already told you. Before the researcher prepares a questionnaire, he has to know what are the information that has to be included. So, if we know the problem, so he has identified the problem, he knows how to get the solution for that problem. So, for that reason, he has to know what are the information that has to be collected. So, for that reason, so here what the researcher will do? Researcher first step is that he has to know what is the information required. So why he has to prepare the questionnaire? So what are the information that has to be collected from the respondents? So that will be analyzed in the first step. So the objective of research should be fully describe the type of information. So remember this. So what are the type of information that has to be collected? Suppose if the researcher don't know what information to collect, then how can he prepare the questionnaire? Some other topic, he cannot prepare the questionnaire. First, he has to know what the information to be collected required for the research. The questionnaire should be incorporate this. So, if we know the information, so what information to collect, on the basis of that, he will prepare the list of questions. That is the questions in the questionnaire, the questions has to be relating to the information what is required by the researcher. The questionnaire should state the hypothesis. Now, what do you mean by hypothesis? So, hypothesis is nothing but before the researcher will do his research work, he will make some assumptions relating to that particular topic. So, on the basis of these assumptions, the researcher will prepare the questionnaire. The questionnaire should state the hypothesis of the research and the scope of research study. So, what is the scope of research study? Everything has to be included in the questionnaire. Next, the researcher must also specify what kind of data is required to test the hypothesis. So, what type of data is required in order to test the assumptions what he has made earlier. So, in order to or in relation to that, he has to prepare the questionnaire and he has to know what kind of data that has to be collected in order to check the hypothesis while designing the questionnaire. Now, the second step is that deciding the type of use of questionnaire. Now, the researcher knows what the information he has to collect by preparing the questionnaire. Now, he has to realize that, so what type of questionnaire he has to prepare. So, we know there are various types of interview or there are various types to collect the information. So, it may be personal interview or telephone interview or it may be mail interview or it may be panel interview also. Now, each and every type of interview will not suit a same type of questionnaire. Now, keeping in that mind, so the researcher has to know what type of questionnaire he has to prepare. That is, after determining the information required. So, in the first step, we know what are the information that has to be collected by the researcher. So, for questionnaire, the next step is to find out the method of use of questionnaire. That is, what method we are going to follow. Whether we are going to take into personal interview or whether we are going to conduct mail interview or whether we are going to conduct telephone interview. Now, a similar type of questionnaire will not suit all type of interviews. So, depending upon that, the researcher has to prepare the questionnaire. The questionnaire can be used for postal interviews, personal interviews or all other methods of data collection. So, this I have already told you, a same type of questionnaire will not suit all type of interviews. The types and circumstances for asking the questions also determine the type of questionnaire. Now, when he is going to ask a question or how he is going to collect the information by giving the questionnaire also depends upon the method of selecting the questionnaire. This means that the structure of questionnaire is determined by the types of questions and ways of asking them. For example, if we take about telephone interview, so if you prepare the questionnaire with lot of images and if you are interviewing the respondents through telephone, whether that questionnaire is suitable? No, because in telephone they are going to just hear the voice. They can't see the pictures. So, on the basis of that, the researcher has to prepare the questionnaire. Hope you understood through that example. In the same way, so whatever the question that has to be asked in the telephone, so whether it can be elaborated in personal interview? No. So, it depends upon the nature of interview what the researcher is going to conduct. And how to decide the type of interview here? It depends upon the information what is going to collect from the respondent. If the respondents are far away from the researcher, then he has to go for telephone interview or he can either go for mail interview also. So, if the researcher can get the respondents very easily, then normally he goes for personal interview. And it also depends upon the time duration as well as the cost which is having with the researcher. If he has lot of time, then he can go for personal interview instead of telephone interview. So, depending upon that disadvantage as well as advantage, he has to select the type of questionnaire. So, remember here, the type of questionnaire will depend upon the type of interview what the researcher is going to conduct. For example, in case of telephone interview, the respondent is unable to show the image. So, I have told you, if the questionnaire is full of images where the researcher has to select from that, what happens in case of telephone interview? It is not possible because that questionnaire cannot be shown through telephone. Similarly, in male interview, unstructured questionnaire is not suitable. Now, what do you mean by unstructured? So, we have already discussed in our previous session. Unstructured means what? It will not be in a systematic manner. So, for male interview, it has to be in a systematic manner. So, such type of questionnaire has to be framed for male interview. Hope you are clear with the second process here. So, a telephone interview is not appropriate for postal measuring. In the same way, telephone interview is not suitable for postal interview or postal measuring or observing the behavior of the respondents. So, here also through whatever the questionnaire which is prepared for telephone interview, so it will not be suitable for collecting the information through observation, because in observation they are just going to observe and collect the data. Similarly, an open-ended questionnaire may not be suitable for interview in case of elaborate answers are expected from the respondent. Now, what do you mean by open-ended questions? So, here the researcher will not have options, specific options. Here, the researcher will give the respondents to explain their wish as per they want. So, that is known as what? Open-ended questions. In the sense, here the respondent has a wish and will to elaborate their answers. It is not limited to only the options which is given by the researcher. For example, close-ended means what? You will have certain options like A, B, C and D. So, within which respondent have to answer the question. But in case of open-ended question, you will not have these options. So, as per their wish and will, they can give any explanation they want. So, that is known as what? Open-ended question. Now, what you have to remember under second process, after determining what the information to be collected by the researcher, the second step is that he has to select the type of questionnaire. So, what type of questionnaire will be suited for personal interview? In the same way, what type of questionnaire will be suited for telephone interview or mail interview or panel interview? Because in each and every type of interview, the questionnaire will be different. So, this is a second process. Now, coming to the third process, determining the contents of individual question. Now, he knows what type of questionnaire to prepare, but he has to know what are the contents which are included in each and every question. Suppose there are 15 questions. So, in 15 questions, what are the contents to be included? That the researcher has to know. So, after determining the information required for the interview and the structure of questionnaire, that is our second step, the next step is to determine the impact of such questions. That is, to know the contents which are included in each and every question. The question should be clear, concise, apt and answerable. Now, what type of contents he has to use? So, we have seen the qualities of good questionnaire. The questionnaire has to be simple as possible. He should not use any of the difficult word or confusing words. So, whatever the contents the researcher includes in each and every question, it should be understandable to the respondent. As far as possible, negative questions as well as biased questions should be avoided. That is, the question which creates some conflicts. So, that type of questions has to be avoided by the researcher. Factors to be considered while deciding on the contents of each question are as under. So, let us see what are the contents that has to be included in the questionnaire. So, the first one is need of questions. So, what are the need or what type of question is needed in the questionnaire? So, that is the questionnaire which do not have any value in that particular topic, that has to be neglected. So, only important questions has to be recorded in the questionnaire. So, questions that do not make sense. So, I have told you unwanted questions has to be ignored. So, questions that do not make sense should not be included in the questionnaire. So, only important questions pertaining to that particular topic has to be included and all the unwanted questions should not be included in the questionnaire. Next one, questions that do not produce meaningful and do not relate to the research topic should be avoided. It's nothing but unwanted question. So the questions which is of another topic, which is not related to this particular topic, so that has to be ignored, and the question should produce some meaningful results. So such type of questions has to be included in the questionnaire. Next one, the contents of the questionnaire are determined after keeping the objectives of research. Of course, the main intention of research activity too is to attain the objectives. So we have seen the research design. So after deciding the problem, we know what is the objective of research activity. So always the questionnaire should be favorable to the objectives of research. So it should be according to the objectives of research. So such type of questions should be decided. So under need of question, the first thing is that if the question is not making any sense, such type of question should be ignored, and it should produce a meaningful answer to the particular problem. At the same time, unwanted or the questions which is not related to that particular topic, that has to be ignored. Next one is the contents of questionnaire should determine, or it should be according to the objectives of research activity. So this will be the first point. Now coming to the second one, classification of questions. Now how they are going to classify the questions in the questionnaire. So if there are many alternative answers to a question, the classification of queries should be developed by substituting the original questions into number of sub-questions. Now what they are going to do? So if the questions is too lengthy or the topic is too lengthy, then the researcher has to make sure that he has to make the question as simple as possible by substituting it by sub-questions. Next one is availability of desired information. Of course, the main intention of preparing the questionnaire is to get the desired information. So the researcher must examine whether the respondent has the necessary information. Now, this is also one of the main steps here. Before issuing the questionnaire, the researcher has to know who are the audience, who are the respondents. So from whom the correct information can be collected. So for example, if the researcher wants to collect the information about education loan, so for that reason, for whom who will be the respondent? Students will be the respondents. Correct? In the same way, the researcher has to know from whom we can collect the information. That is desired information from the respondent. This helps to control if the respondent can provide real answers. Now, taking the same example, that is, the researcher wants to collect the information about education loan from the students. So, now the respondents are students. The researcher has to know students, and he has to make sure that we can't collect information from all the students because all the students might not have taken the education loan. So, here the researcher has to know who has taken education loan. From them, he has to collect the information. From whom we will get the exact results or exact answer to a particular question, they has to be selected as a respondent. Next one is, in addition to this, it should ensure that data collection is not costly and time consuming. So always the researcher has to think about time as well as cost. So he has to go through that method where it is less costly, at the same time it is less time consuming. The respondents must understand the questions appropriately. The researcher must ask the questions by observing that each question has an answer and can be answered. Now, the questionnaire should be in such a way that each and every question has to be answered by the respondents. In the sense, no difficult questions has to be given, and at the same time the question should be relating to that particular topic and it should be known to the respondent also. So such type of question has to be included. Respondent should have sufficient knowledge to answer the questions. So this I have told you, that is best selection of the respondents. So here selection of respondent is a great task here because the researcher might not be knowing who are the correct respondents. So he has to make sure that who is the right respondent from whom the researcher can collect the correct information. Next, fourth step is that form of questions and response. So what are the questions that has to be framed and how the respondents will respond to that questions. So that is your fourth step. The format of questions and the response from the respondents should be determined by the researcher. So it has to be determined by the researcher in advance itself. The questions may be either direct or indirect. So the questions can be asked directly or indirectly relating to that particular topic in the form of an open-ended or close-ended alternative or split form. So I have discussed about open-ended as well as close-ended questions. So it depends upon the researcher whether he has to select the open-ended question or close-ended question. Now what do you mean by open-ended question? Here the respondents have all the freedom to answer that question in any way they want, but they want the answer. Under close-ended questions, you will have only limited options within which the respondents have to answer those questions. For example, if a question is given and you are having only two options, yes or no. Now the respondents will not have the freedom to elaborate their answer. Either they have to select yes or no. So it is termed as what? Close-ended questions, because it is closed in the sense here the respondents cannot or will not have the freedom to explore their answers. Next, under that we are going to discuss about direct questions. It is under form of questions. What type of questions a researcher can be given to the respondent. So first one is direct questions. So what do you mean by direct questions? The questions which is asked directly to the respondents relating to that particular topic. So direct questions are asked in expressive form to obtain the desired information. So in order to get the information, here the researcher will ask the respondent direct questions. That is known as what? Direct questions. Questions are asked on the assumption that the respondents have answered to them. Here they will make an assumption that the respondent will answer their question and direct questions will be asked to the respondent. Next, the second type is that indirect questions. Now, here the researcher wants the information on a particular topic, but he is not going to ask the questions directly, but indirectly he is going to ask the question because he wants to answer that question in depth. So, he is going to ask the question indirectly. So, while designing indirect questions, care should be taken to include those questions that are very near to the objective of research. So, whatever may be the situation, if he wants to collect the in-depth information, then the researcher has to make sure that the questionnaire should be framed in such a way that it should be related to the objective of research activity. So, it should be accordance to research activity. Indirect questions are those questions that are designed to understand the response rather than actual information. Whereas in direct questions, either they will answer yes or no. So such type of indirect answers will be, or such type of direct answers will be given by the respondent. So it is not only relating to yes or no. So for example, positive or negative, female or male. So such type of direct answers will be given. But in case of indirect questions, so there is an exploration of answer here. That is, instead of giving the actual information, they will give the information in a brief way. So that is known as what? Indirect questions. In this questionnaire, the interviewer and the respondents do not have the same opinion about the concept of the question. Here, the researcher as well as the respondent will not have the same opinion. And there is also, or here they will have a freedom to explore their answer. Indirect questions helps to gather information on the respondents, that is emotional response or behavior such as self-esteem or self-praise. So, I have told you under indirect questions it is not asked directly. Indirectly they are going to collect the information from the respondents. Next, open-ended question. I have already discussed about it. Let us see. Open-ended questions are those questions that allow the respondents the freedom to express their will and viewpoint. So, it is open to all. So, here the respondents can open the information how they want. So they can express their will as well as wish. So they can explore their answers. So open-ended means what? So here the respondent is not limited to particular options. He can open everything. So he can open up himself and give the information. The respondents have freedom to answer within the framework of their intelligence. Now here the respondents is going to answer with more freedom when compared to close-ended questions. So depending upon their intelligence, they are going to explore the answer. Open-ended questions are asked when additional information is required by the researcher. Now, when open-ended questions are used, when the researcher wants more information, rather than fixing up to a particular answer, if the researcher wants more information, then he goes for open-ended questions. For example, which branded soap you use for washing clothes and why? Now, and why is what? It is open-ended questions. So, they will give enormous number of reasons. Now, the person who is telling one reason might be different from that of another reason. So, here this is called as close-ended question. Which branded soap you use for washing clothes? So, you will have only limited answers. So, you will tell any one soap name. But why is a question where you have to explore your answers. That is open-ended questions. So, this is an open-ended question. Hope you are clear with open-ended questions. Next one is fixed alternative questions. So, it is also called as close-ended question, where you will have fixed alternative within which the respondents have to answer your question. So, fixed alternative questions are also called as close-ended questions. So, this I have already told you. It is also called as close-ended questions. In this method, various alternative answers are provided to facilitate the respondent to answer the question. Now, what they are going to do here? They will give a fixed number of options within which the respondents have to answer. So, it is called as close-ended question. A respondent can select one of the answers given in the questionnaire and tick the appropriate box meant for this purpose. So, for example, there is a question here and the options are A, B, C and D. Now, what happens? Now, the respondent will select A. Now, this will be the answer for that particular question according to that respondent. So, he will not have any other option to answer here. So, he will just tick option A. So, that is known as what? Close-ended question. The answers to the questions may be in the form of yes or no or true or false. So, it may be in the form of yes or no question, or true or false question, or a fixed alternative will be given. It may be 4 options or 5 options within which the respondent have to answer. So, alternative answers may vary from one question to another. Such questionnaire facilitate easy analysis of answers and tabulation still becomes much easier. Now, when compared to open-ended questions, so here if they are going to elaborate their answers, each and every respondent will elaborate their answers in a different manner. But in case of fixed or close-ended questions, what they are going to do? Within with the options. So, within the options, they are going to answer. So, thereby, it helps the researcher to analyze as well as in the process of tabulations, it will be very easier because you have a limited options there. But in case of open-ended, all the elaborate answers have to be put together and they have to analyze carefully. So, that is the main disadvantage of open-ended question. Next one is dichotomous question. Now, what is this dichotomous question? Here, the researcher will have an option to a particular question where he has to select only one option. That is known as what? Dichotomous questions. So, splitting questions allow the respondent to choose between 2 alternative answers. Responses are limited to just 2 simple words. Now, for example, if a question is been asked and the option is true or false. So, the option is true or false. Now, either it should be true or it should be false. Any one answer will be selected by the respondent. They are termed as what? Dichotomous question. In the sense, a question which will be having only limited option, either two option, out of which the respondent have to select any one. So, questions consist of select exclusive answers. They are alternative answer to question in the form of yes or no. This is a handy approach to questions that can be answered simply. So, here the limited options will be given to the respondents. That is only two options, either yes or no or true or false. Such type of questions will be given. So, responses are divided into two categories. One is positive, other one is negative. So, either positive have to be the answer or negative can be the answer. So, they are termed as what? Dichotomous question. Next one is multi-dichotomous question. Now, here before the explanation, I will give an example here. Now, they have asked a question where you will be having an option A, B, C, D and E. So, these are the options here. Now, the answers is not only one. So, out of this option, the answer will not only one like dichotomous, and a dichotomous answer will be only one answer. But here, for example, A may be the correct answer, D may be the correct answer, E may be the correct answer. So, for example, what is the use of having an industry in a country? So, the options may be economic development or employment opportunity or increase in GDP. So, these are the positive answers to that particular topic. Now, here the options may be more than two also. So, they are termed as what? Multi-dichotomous question. That is, you have seen a question where the answer will be all of the above. In the sense, all the answers are correct. So, they are termed as what? Dichotomous question. There are specific alternative answers to multi-dichotomous question. So, under multi-dichotomous question, it's not only one option where the researcher is going to select. So, there may be more than 2 to 3 answers. So, they are termed as what? Multi-dichotomous question. The respondents can choose one or more number of answers. The questionnaire containing such question is called as cafeteria questionnaire. So, it is also termed as what? Cafeteria questionnaire, because the answers will not only one, it will be more than one also. This questionnaire is suitable to express the opinion of the respondents so that they are free to choose one or more number of answers. So, here the respondents is given a freedom to choose more than one or two answers. For example, there are many reasons to use a particular brand of soap. The questionnaire will contain such reasons. Now, what they are giving? So, they will give a name of a particular soap and what is the use of it, and they have given number of use of that particular soap. Now, here the researcher cannot select only one answer because the other answer will also be correct there. He is going to select more than 2 to 3 options. Respondents can choose one or more number of answers given in the questionnaire. So, they are termed as what? Multi-dichotomous questions. Now, coming to the fifth step, sequence and layout decision of question. So, I have told you, so a question has to be related to each other. So, they are termed as what? Sequence, or it is also called as layout questions. That is, the question what the researcher is going to ask, it has to be in a same order. At the same time, it has to be related to each other. The number of questions is determined on the basis of the objective of research and the subject matter of the research study. So, this we know, always the questionnaire has to be in such a way that it should be related to the objective as well as it should be related to the subject matter of the study of that particular researcher. The researcher should understand the number of questions and the order questions will be important to the success of survey. So, he knows the number of questions. For example, the researcher have selected 15 questions, but he has to know the order also, and each and every question has to be related to each other. Now, for example, if a question is being asked, what is the income of a particular person? Suppose the income is 1 lakh per annum, then the next question will be, how much of the share of that particular income will be distributed for the education of his student. So these two questions are interrelated to each other. First, the researcher wants to know the income. Next, he wants to know how much portion of that income is being distributed for the education of his children. So these type of question has to be asked in the questionnaire. That is, it has to be interrelated to each other. Neither the highest number of questions nor the lowest number of questions serve the purpose of the interview. So this I have told you, there should not be more number of questions. At the same time, there should not be least number of questions. So depending upon the information what is to be collected by the researcher, he has to select the number of questions. The following general principles should be followed while determining the sequence as well as design of questions in the questionnaire. So let us see what are the sequence as well as the design of questions. So the first one is broad general questions. The questionnaire should commence with broad general questions. This will be done in order to increase the answering ability. So why the broad as well as general question has to be given to the respondent? Because in order to increasing the answering ability as well as the confidence of the respondents. So they have to give the broad general questions. So broad questions means what? The question which will fetch you more information. So such type of question has to be framed and it has to be given to the respondent. Next one is simple and direct questions. So the question should be as simple as possible and the direct questions has to be asked to the respondent. The questionnaire should begin with more introductory questions. So first, in the questionnaire, the researcher wants to know about the respondent first, not too personal questions, but the basic introduction has to be there. Then he'll come to the topic. So questions that are relatively easy to answer should be arranged first. So which are the questions that are relatively easy? That has to be arranged first. The respondent may not answer with much interest if the difficult answers are arranged in the beginning. So what happens if the difficult questions are arranged in the beginning? Then if he reads the question, he may neglect to answer the questionnaire. In such situation, easy questions has to be given first. Then it has to be come to the topic where the difficult question has to be asked. Avoid general questions. So this I have already told you. So, simple questions has to be asked, but general questions has to be avoided. That is, the researcher should avoid common questions. That is, general questions has to be avoided. Next, avoid putting identical questions at one place. So, instead of putting all the questions, identical questions at one place, it may lead to boredom of a respondent. So, make sure that interesting questions has to be added in between. It is better to avoid putting identical questions at one place. If the identical questions are put at one place, the respondent may get boredom. So what happens? So all the similar type of questions are put together. So it may lead to the boredom of a respondent. So for example, if the respondents may be reluctant to answer the series of questions such as responding to a particular statement only. Suppose a statement is given and all the questions relating to that statement is asked simultaneously. So it will be a boredom for the respondent. Next one is personal questions should be asked at the end. So, this you can understand easily, all the personal question. Most of the time, the researcher will avoid to ask the personal question because the respondent will not answer all the personal questions. So, they may feel hesitate to answer the personal questions. In that situation, what happens? Personal question has to be kept at the end because the researcher wants to know the exact information for the particular problem what he is going to discuss. It is unnecessary to ask the personal questions from the respondent. So it is good idea to answer respondents' personal issues such as education, then qualification, marital status, place of residence, family background, etc. at the end of the questionnaire. So this is how they are going to include the questions. That is sequence as well as the series what they have to follow. The hierarchy of assembling the questionnaire can be summarized as below. So let us see how the hierarchy or what is the step-by-step procedure in order to decide the sequence of questions. The questionnaire should begin with the general as well as simple questions. So the question has to be begin with general as well as simple questions. If you are including difficult questions, then it may be difficult for the respondent to answer. Specific questions should be started at a little while. So, specific questions where the answer is very specific. So, such type of questions has to be added later. Questions should be logically arranged. So, it's not that it has to be given as it is. So, it has to be logically arranged. Then, it is a good idea to include difficult questions in the middle of the questionnaire. So, difficult question has to be given in the middle of the questionnaire. Postal questionnaire should be carefully designed. So, those questionnaire where it has to be sent through postal, where the respondents will answer and send it back. So, it has to be arranged properly. Next, it is the best idea to arrange personal questions at the end of the questionnaire. So, this I have already told you, personal questions has to be given at the end of questionnaire. Next, last step is that pre-testing the questionnaire. So, what do you mean by pre-testing? So, I have already told you. So, instead of giving the questionnaire to a whole population, what the researcher has to do? Researcher has to distribute to a group of people and he has to see what is the reaction of that group of people on this questionnaire. That is known as pre-testing. So, it is better to pre-test the questionnaire before using it for final interview. Although the draft of the questionnaire is carefully drafted, yet it is not free from errors or confusions. Whatever the care that the researcher might have taken in drafting the questionnaire, but still it is not free from errors as well as confusions. So, what the researcher has to do before distributing it to the large population, he has to test that questionnaire first, which is known as what? Pre-testing of questionnaire. Pre-examination will be conducted with the precaution that such mistakes or confusions should not be repeated at the final interview. Now, what is the main intention of pre-testing? Because if we distribute for the whole population, suppose there is a confusion or mistakes in the questionnaire, so it will affect the whole population. In order to reduce that, what the researcher has to do, it has to be distributed to a group of people, pre-test, and if it is successful, he can give it to the whole population, or if he want to make any corrections, he can make there itself. Some questions create doubts while conducting a pre-test. So, if there is any doubt in the questions, so such doubt has to be clarified and the researcher has to make that question as simple as possible so that any doubt will not be there when it goes for testing through whole population. Some questions are refused by the respondents and some questions stay outside the scope of research objectives. So, everything will be identified through pre-testing of questionnaire. So, what type of questions that has to be removed from that, or what type of questions that has to be added, which question is having lot of confusions, where the respondent is having more doubt. So, that will be come to know by pre-testing the questionnaire. It is desirable to delete such questions from the questionnaire. So, if you have any such type of doubtful questions or confusing questions for the respondent, so that questions has to be deleted. Therefore, a questionnaire is redesigned by adding new questions or deleting the unwanted questions or modifying the existing questions. So, if you have any such type of problem, what the researcher has to do, if the question has to be deleted, he has to delete that. If he wants to modify or if he wants to correct that, he can make corrections there. This will help to find the solutions while conducting the interview. So, before conducting or before giving through the whole population, he has to pre-test the questionnaire in order to know the limitations of questionnaire. So, pre-test response and the outcome will help to implement the next step more effectively. So, in order to make the questionnaire ready and it has to be distributed to the population, so this pre-test plays a very important role. Next, advantages of pre-test questionnaire. Let us see what are the advantages here. It is easy to know whether the material of the interview requires additional information or not. So, by pre-testing, the researcher will come to know how the respondents have reacted on that particular questionnaire, and if anything it has to be added to that. So, that will be known to the researcher. Next is, it is helpful to know whether the questions are arranged sequentially or not. Of course, arrangement of the questions should be in a sequential order and it has to be related to each other. That is, the question has to be related to each other. So, if it is there, it will come to know under pre-test. Next, it is easy to know whether the questions are suspicious or objectable or not. So, if there is any question which is having doubt or confusions by the respondents, that also will come to know by pre-test. Next, it helps to understand whether the respondents have clearly understood the questions or not. So, by seeing the answers what they have made in pre-test, so the researcher will come to know whether the questions have been understood by the respondents properly or not. Next one is, it helps to delete the absurd or unwanted questions. So, this is also one of the advantage here. So, suppose the researcher have added any of the unwanted questions which is out of the objective of research, then such type of questions can be deleted here. The pre-tested questionnaire lays the foundation for the final interview. So, why the main intention of pre-test is to make that questionnaire ready for the final interview. So, these are the few advantages of pre-test questionnaire. Hope you understood about it. That is designing or drafting a questionnaire. So, what are the processes which are involved in drafting a questionnaire? So, in my next session, I am going to discuss about advantages as well as disadvantages of questionnaire. Very easy topic because you know all the aspects of questionnaire now. So, what is questionnaire? What are its features or what are its characteristics? What are the qualities of a good questionnaire? So, how to design a questionnaire or what is the process of questionnaire? Everything you have discussed in a previous session. So, in my next session, I am going to discuss these two topics, that is relating to questionnaire, that is advantages as well as disadvantages. So, let us see what are the advantages as well as disadvantages in the next session. So, my dear students, hope you all understood today's session. See you all in my next session with a new topic. Till then, take care. Thank you.